Hello friends, welcome. Friends, in the morning I saw this document which I was reading through, and I spent almost like 3 hours reading this document. So this is a document which came out just yesterday on 11th June 2024, and this document is what? This document, sorry, 11th July 2024, and this document is a consultation paper released by TRAI on request of the government to decide the framework for service authorization licenses to be granted under the Indian Telecommunication Act 2023. Now, what is the purpose of this video? The purpose of this video is to give you the background of what led to this issuance of this document and what this document will finally accomplish, and what are the elements which are missing in this document which will make the task a little difficult, because you can't really have a document issued in isolation which is not holistic enough to take care of every aspect of licensing. And that is what I figured out when I was reading through the document. I figured out that this document, the questions that this document is asking, cannot be resolved without including the bottleneck resources, which are part and parcel of the license, without which the structure of the license cannot be decided. You cannot decide what kind of license structure that you typically would need and which will work unless you also map the license with the bottleneck resources, especially spectrum, which is very, very important, which is missing in this document. That's what I figured out. Now, before I get into this discussion and tell you what I have found out and what this document will accomplish, let's first understand that what was the reference which DOT gave in order for this document to come out, and what framework under which this consultation is happening. Because this consultation is not happening suo motu by TRAI, it is happening based on the reference which has been given by DOT. So let's look at the reference first. Now, what DOT, this reference you can find in page number 23, which I have underlined here. So if I go here, you will see that the DOT's reference to TRAI was dated 21st June 2024. So this is a reference document. This is a reference which is 21st June 2024, and you will find the reference in annexure 1.1 in the same consultation paper, right? You go there, you will find annexure 1.1. Now, why I am not going to annexure 1.1? Because that is a picture pasted document. This is being reproduced by TRAI in the same paper, and where I can underline. So I'm looking at this piece right here, okay, rather than going to annexure 1.1 directly. So what DOT is saying? DOT is saying that since there is a new Telecommunication Act 2023, which has changed certain condition from the earlier act, Telegraph Act, which is 1884. Now, what is the key change which they have made? There are many changes which have been made, but what is the key change which is anchoring this discussion? So let's understand that. The key change is that in 1885, the Telegraph Act included a word license, and they did not define that word license. It included the license, saying that the government of India can grant license on payment terms which it thinks fit. So that is the kind of verbiage that was used. Now what they have done is that they've changed the word license to authorization, which is a significant shift. Now, what is the background for this change? Let's understand this. What is the background for this change? The reason that they have changed this word license to authorization, because internationally the word license is not used as far as telecom services are concerned. They generally use the word authorization. So whenever you go to European countries, you will find that they have used the word authorization, and which is kind of a permission granted by the government for offering services and spectrum is acquired separately through auction. So this is a global practice which is followed. Now in India, we have been following different practices in different points of time in past, which I am going to take you through in this presentation to show you that how our licensing regime has evolved. Now because we have a new Telecom Act and we have changed the word license to authorization, what DOT is saying now through this reference, saying that given the change that we have made, do you think that the existing licensing structure that we follow can be improved, can be made more simple, can be made less voluminous, so that it can scale, it can make the operator's life easy by increasing ease of doing business? All these things are being discussed in this consultation paper. So this consultation paper is not expanding the current license framework by including new service, though there is a question number 17 which talks about inclusion of new services as well. But I don't think that the intent of DOT is to include OTT and other services in this framework of discussion which is happening right now. Now the stakeholders may bring that into this discussion, that's a different point, but I don't see any intent or neither TRAI nor DOT to include OTT in this frame of discussion. Okay, so that is the very important point of discussion before I go forward with my presentation in this video. Now, if you look at this, there is a background paper which the DOT has laid out in their letter, which is the same letter of 21st June 2024. So what DOT is saying, Section 59 of the Telecommunication Act provides amendment to the TRAI's regulatory authority, and it provides that license means an authorized entity providing telecommunication service under the Telecommunication Act. Currently, the licensing and regulatory framework for different types of telecom service being governed by the provision of Indian Telegraph Act, and the extent restrictions are followed. And then it goes on to say, in this, if you look at this particular document, and if I go further, and it's saying that, look, this is the point to be read here, which is important, which is a summary. It says that for the conditions of the extent of licensing in the regulatory framework related to different sections of Telecom Act, further, some of the terms and conditions will be required to be amended, incorporated in the light of the new provision of this Act on policy related to sector like space and possibility of reducing the number of authorization and rationalizing and simplification, merger and rationalization of the terms of to improve ease of doing business may also be examined. That's all they are saying. They are not saying anything more. Now, before I get into the details of this consultation paper and the question that the TRAI asked, it is important to understand that what is our framework of licensing and how it evolved. I'm just going to give you a peek so that you understand that where we started and where we are and why we are here and what kind of improvements are possible. See, our licensing regime, right, basically started in 1990s. Before that, it was only the government of India offering services, and they were incapable of expanding telecommunication services in India, and they realized that. Therefore, what they did was, in 1995, they opened up the licensing structure and invited private players' participation in the telecommunication space. Now, the character of those licenses, which were not authorization by the way, the character of those licenses in year 1995 were quite different from what it is today. It has evolved over the years, and I'll tell you the reason how they have evolved and why they have evolved. Now, in 1995, a license was a paper document only. So it was basically a paper document which actually had spectrum not bundled with it, right? The spectrum was bundled with it, but it was an authorization, and it was basically a paper document which was auctioned. The spectrum was not auctioned, the license was auctioned. And the license was service and technology specific. This is very important. The license was auctioned, it was a paper document, the permission was auctioned, spectrum was bundled with it, and it was service and technology specific. This is important. Why it was service and technology specific means that basic service license was auctioned separately, cellular services were auctioned separately, and the technology that you are using for basic services and cellular services were different. For cellular services, you are using GSM technology. For basic services, you are using CDMA technology. So there was a technology and service specific license structure. And the fees, which was the license fees, right? They were decided based on auction, and they were on a deferred basis, right? On a periodic deferred basis for a 10-year period. And the deferred payment structure was fixed in nature. It was decided well in advance based on the auction process. Means how much money you have to pay in the duration of 10 years each year, right? Just like we are paying for spectrum auctions today, right? Similarly, the license structure was also similar, and it was a deferred payment structure. Now, what happened was, at that time, the operators bid, very much, you can say, enthusiastically, and as a result, they committed a lot of license fee from the auction process, and therefore their deferred payment became overwhelmingly high. So they had to pay a huge amount of money each and every year as they passed through their business. And therefore what happened was, soon they realized that they can't function anymore. So they reached the point that in 2001, what happened was, actually before that, in 1999, they went to the government and said that, look, we can't function like this, and you have to convert the license into a revenue share structure. So that's the history of conversion of license into a revenue share structure, which is between 2000 and 2003. So there was a new regime which came into being, where the license fee now has been converted from fixed to revenue share. So the operators now have to pay a revenue share versus what they were paying earlier. And that revenue share, the DoT decided based on consultation with TRAI. So that's the difference. The access license remains service specific and technology specific. That did not change. And access license were still granted through auction. There was a fourth cellular license which took place in 2001, and the access spectrum continued to be bundled with license. Right? So that was between 2001 and 2003. Now what happened was that because the both kind of licenses, because there were two different licenses I told you, from an access point of view, one was basic service license, another was cellular license. The basic services license did not empower them to offer cellular telephony, right? The cellular license empowered the operators to offer cellular telephony. Now, cellular telephony were more valuable compared to basic service license. So what happened was, because the basic service license were valued less, they had the full empowerment to convert them to cellular. Because what happened was that the technology that they used, the basic service license providers used, actually replicated exactly what cellular technology was used by the cellular service provider. Means they were using GSM technology, and the basic service license service provider were using CDMA technology. Now they were able to circumvent the regulatory constraint which prevented them to replicate the similar kind of services which the cellular license were offering. So they were able to circumvent that. Now because they were able to circumvent that, the cellular operators went to court, and their basic services licenses actually got cancelled, or the court forced them to convert those licenses to a cellular license and pay the difference in fees which they need to pay, because the cellular licenses were of a higher value compared to basic service license, and they had to also have to pay penalty. So that's what happened in 2003, and that led to a huge change in the licensing regime. And what was the change? Then what happened in the licensing regime? Now licenses became technology neutral and service neutral, but within a particular spectrum band, the licenses actually remain technology specific. It is a little complicated to understand. I don't want you to get confused here. Just be with me that you have a license document which was technology specific and service specific. Both were converted into technology neutral and service neutral, because whether you are basic services, whether you are cellular services, one and the same thing. You can offer whatever you want to offer, because the license terms and the payment condition were similar in nature. However, if you are using spectrum which is of a different kind in a different band, and if you are using a technology which is of a different nature, then the rules of spectrum allocation and the payment condition for spectrum was different for basic service license as well as for cellular license. So therefore, though it was looking like technology neutral and service neutral, it was technology specific within the band of operation, where spectrum was being used to offer services. So that happened. And then one more thing which happened in, after 2003, now licenses were also granted administratively. Earlier licenses were through auction, now licenses were granted administratively. Now what happened in 2012 and 2013 after the 2G scam? There was a system of unified licenses which were issued, and those unified licenses were issued in a manner that it kind of bundled different type categories of license under the banner of unified license, right? And it, for the first time, delinked spectrum from the license and made it mandatory to acquire spectrum through auction. Now, it is important to understand this. Though there is a word of unified license, the unified license did only one thing, because there were different categories of licenses, like access license, NLD license, ILD license, ISP license, different types of license, category A, category B, etc. What unified license did was they bundled all the license into one and gave an opportunity to the operator to acquire just one license and empower them to offer all kinds of services which could also have been acquired separately under the framework of a different license or a specific license. Means, let's say there are 10 different licenses which allow a service provider to offer different kinds of services. The unified license only gave them the opportunity to acquire all the sets of license under the banner of unified license on a payment condition which was lower than the sum of all. Means, if all the licenses were acquired separately, the unified license only enabled a flexibility to acquire all of them together at a fee which was lower. That's all. And delinking of spectrum from licenses. Then what happened was that after 2015 onwards, what happened was there were some new licenses which were issued, like the VNO license, etc. Now let's come to the consultation paper, which is important because I don't want to waste too much time in the background. What is this consultation paper? As I told you in the reference, what this consultation paper is trying to achieve. The key issues in the consultation paper are the following. They are asking the following. I have summarized it and I may go through a little bit of detail after I have laid out the summary before you. I don't know what is happening to my pen. This is the problem. Okay. So the key issues in the consultation papers. For the first issue is, should DOT issue authorization instead of signing a license? As I told you that authorization is an international norm. The signing of license is an Indian kind of practice, which kind of animated because of the history that we are in, and we will continue to follow the same condition. And the licenses were very bulky in nature. There's so many conditions, 200 pages, and every condition that we incorporated in the license. Rather than incorporating conditions in the license, it is better to have an act which anchors all those provisions so that the licensee or the authorized entity is obligated to meet the condition of the act. Because what is the point in having a separate, discourse or an agreement with each and every service provider with DOT rather than having an act which anchors all those conditions in a much more simplified and easy to understand form, so that if a violation takes place by an authorized entity, then he will be liable under the act. That's a much more better outcome to have rather than an individual license agreement between DOT and the service provider. So that's the question that they are asking. Should DOT issue authorization instead of signing license? This is important. Currently, DOT and service provider enter into license agreement considering the issue. So they are considering issue of authorization instead. Then there is the next point. Pan-India authorization to be issued for licenses. As should there be a Pan-India authorization like access service license and a Pan-India? Today the licenses are service specific to a specific service area. Let's say Delhi has got a separate license, Maharashtra will have a separate license, Mumbai will have a separate license, West Bengal will have a separate license. Then we have spectrum which are kind of getting fragmented within these licenses. So can there be a Pan-India authorization? Though we have Pan-India authorization today like NLD, ILD, but can we expand it to access services also? And there are certain category of licenses like space licenses where should there be a Pan-India authorization, and what should be the structure of those authorization, and what should be the payment condition for those authorization, and other conditions which are going to secure the interest of both DOT as well as the service provider. Can authorization license document be simplified? This is a question that they are asking. So many questions, I just simplified those questions. Can multiple authorization be merged into one? That's the question they are asking. Is there a need for additional authorization beyond the current one, which I said? But when I was reading through this para, and I'm going to show you if I have time, in this discourse of this presentation, I didn't find that there is any intent to include OTT in this license, in this question, which TRAI is asking, right? Is there a need for additional authorization? This is question number 17, by the way. Should new services like space sector require a modification of the license authorization condition given the GUI's new space policy announcement, right? So GUI has a new space policy announcement. Should there be some kind of modification, etc.? What should be the license fee and other condition? And you have to include that spectrum assignment issues are not included in the paper. Now, let's talk about one important issue. See, look, how will you decide whether there is a need for a pan-India authorization? How will you decide whether how the license document can be simplified? Can there multiple authorization can be merged into one? How will you decide that? What is the fundamental basis of deciding all this criteria? In my view, rather than confusing the whole issue, because we have really confused the whole issue. And TRAI in the paper basically talks about that in the same manner which I'm describing right now. They're saying that in real sense, there is no simplification or unified license. It is like multiple licenses are clubbed into one document to be taken by a service provider. It's like a bouquet of licenses under the UL license. That's all. The complications of different licenses with different conditions are still to be incorporated in the UL license, and the obligation of the UL licensee has to be required to meet those conditions. So we don't have a simplified licensing regime even though we call it a UL licensing regime. So how will you decide? What should be the structure of a license? See, let me simplify this, because there could be many discussions. It can kind of digest into multiple, there can be many offshoot of these discussions. But the main point is the access service license, because if you look at the current license fee structure, you will find that 99% of the license fee, or maybe not 99, maybe 95% of the license fee originates from the access service licenses. And those are the most important license. Now, the criteria for access service license, all those licenses which is permitting mobile communication or internet services, which are pan-India basis, is driven by the fact that whether your license is able to use bottleneck resources like spectrum efficiently or not. That's the key criteria. And let me explain to you what I mean by this, so that you understand, what should be the criteria to be decided and why it is not good for not including spectrum assignment issue in this license, right? So see, look at this map of India, right? Just to basically get out of the issue about copyrights, I asked ChatGPT to create this map, and ChatGPT has created this map. So it may not look very good, but that's okay. So if you see that the service area boundaries are marked in borders, you look at this map. So there are borders which are actually marking the service areas boundaries, right? You can see this. Again, the pen is not working. Okay. So yeah. So here is the Rajasthan circle. So there is a border here. Now, if you are making an assignment of spectrum under this framework of a license which has been granted for Rajasthan alone, spectrum will be acquired separately. You know that, right? And the same spectrum band, let's say a particular band or a particular block of spectrum by a particular service provider gets acquired in Rajasthan, and then we have got MP adjoining to Rajasthan, the same block gets acquired by a different service provider, you will have collusion in the border. The border will be basically, let's say, if both of them offering services in the same block of spectrum and they don't have harmonized spectrum band across the border, which is very difficult to happen, there will be interference in the border. So and when you have only 2 or 3 service providers, now is the time to have a spectrum harmonization rules set up in such a way that all the 3 or 4 service providers have access spectrum which runs across the state boundaries, so that these kind of interference can be mitigated. Because these are much more prone in TDD spectrum than FDD spectrum. In FDD spectrum, you can curtail the interference I don't want to get into the technical discussion, but if you look at the 5G spectrum and even the 4G spectrum in the higher frequency band, is the 2.3, 2.5 and 3.5 gigahertz band, are TDD spectrum, which are much more prone to these kind of interferences. So we can mitigate those interferences if you have a pan-India license. Similarly, satellite. A satellite cannot have service-specific license. It has to have a pan-India license, right? So the criteria to decide whether a license has to be, circle-specific or pan-India specific is determined by the fact that how a licensee is going to use bottleneck resources, that is spectrum. That should be the main criteria rather than getting into other criteria. It does not matter. And license fees and other conditions can be same across all licenses. It does not matter. It should be nominal fees. It should be administrative fees. You can't really have huge amount of license fees when spectrum is already getting acquired through auction process. You should virtually make all those licenses free. What is the point? Unless and until those licenses are required to be managed by DOT, DOT has to put multiple people to manage those licenses or assign numbering plan and other resources which requires day-to-day administration by DOT. Those administration cost has to be recovered. Otherwise, there is no point in having any license fee. It should be abundant. The cost of a license is only the spectrum and the administrative expenses incurred by DOT. Okay, and the structure of the license should be determined by how you are able to manage bottleneck resources, whether you are able to use bottleneck resources efficiently or not. That should be the criteria of deciding the license or the structure of the license. So friends, I think I don't have much time here, but I'll just go straight to the paper. Just to give a little bit of deep dive, if I able to see some points of which are worth discussion. So if you see here that this is basically talking about the earlier structure of the license, and then it talks about the salient feature of the DOT's license. And so you say that you see this, the providing telecommunication services in the Telecommunication Act, the person shall obtain authorization from the central government, and this is a departure from the extent where the central government was granting license and the license agreement was entered between the state and the center. And then if you go further down below, I don't think that all points have been discussed. I think I should go straight to the questions because there is no point in Oh, by the way, let's do one more thing. Let me just tell you why I believe that the question about the question number 17, because the question number 17 is very important, because people are worried that whether the OTT kind of will get included here or not, because that issue should be addressed in this discussion, and I think that will be much more important. So if I look at this, there is a question number 17. Let's look at question number 17 if I can find that. Question number 18. Oh, question number 17 is here probably. Just a minute, let me pause my video. So if you look at this question number 17, what it is saying, whether there is a need for introduction of new authorization subcategories of authorization under the Telecommunication Act of 2023. If yes, what type of services, new authorization or subcategory of authorization should be introduced. Now, if you look at the background discussion, right, regarding this question, you will find that there is no mention of OTT. This you can read through because there's no point of me basically wasting time. So look, it starts from 2.81. It starts with, apart from there could be a need for introducing certain new authorization of subcategory to extend possible. For instance, extend license regime, access service authorization was granted on a telecom metro level. There is no access service authorization on a secondary switching level, SSA. There is a need of a national unified authorization, end-to-end, blah, blah. And then it goes on to say that it is noteworthy that there is an authorization access service B under extent ULVNO regime, the service area category B. So if you look at this, you will find that there is no mention of introducing any kind of app-based authorization. So that is not the intent of DOT. It is very clear from this. And that's why if you look at other questions, you'll find that this consultation paper is not talking about including app-based services for authorization. This is the only question where they talk about introduction of new authorization. There could be a possibility that the stakeholder may bring out this question and bring in this question about authorization of OTT, etc. But I don't think neither DOT nor TRAI intends to do that under the framework of Indian Telecommunication Act of 2023. At least from this paper, I can't see this because I've gone through the whole paper and I don't see this. Okay, so I think this is the end of the presentation. I don't think that anything else can be covered. See, there are many things can be covered, but the time is already, this half an hour has passed, and I don't think that I'll be able to do justice by, expanding this video beyond this, what I have already discussed. So I hope that you might have liked this video. If you have any questions or concern or any kind of comments, please let me know. I will try my level best to answer them. And thanks as usual for listening to this video and listening till the end of this video. Thank you very much, and I'll come back with a new video next time very soon.